Welcome to the BEworks 2021 Choice Architecture Report launch event. I am Warda Malik, CMO of BEworks, and I have the pleasure of hosting our guests and all of you online today. BEworks is a consulting firm and research institute dedicated to the application of behavioral science to real-world challenges. We were founded in 2010 by the field's leading experts, Professors Dan Ariely and Nina Mazar, and CEO Kelly Peters. Kelly and Dan are joining us here today. The BEworks Choice Architecture Report is an annual report containing our leadership perspectives on the issues that matter to humanity, society, and the economy at large. It also contains several diverse case studies of behavioral economics being applied to challenges across sectors, including financial services, energy, sustainability, and consumer goods. There is no question that the events of 2020 have changed us all tremendously. They have had an impact on our relationships, the way we work. They have shed a light on the inequalities and injustices that exist in our prevailing system and have provided us the opportunity to pause and reevaluate who we want to be as people and companies coming back into the post-pandemic era, whenever that will be. The theme of this year's report is focused on going beyond innovation to leading and building with purpose to create a better world, going from innovation to aspiration to create a bigger impact, not just for shareholders, but for all stakeholders at large. I have the honor of hosting 4 great minds on this very topic today, each with their own perspectives on how business leaders and people can move forward to aspire for better with behavioral science at its core. By fundamentally understanding people, we can design a world that leads to better outcomes for all. And now, to introduce our speakers. Kelly Peters is the CEO and co-founder of BEworks. Kelly is a pioneer in applied behavioral economics. She has grown BEworks to become the world's leading behavioral economics firm and one of the largest employers of psychologists in the private sector. She's developed the BEworks method, a proprietary framework which fuses behavioral insights with the scientific method. This approach has been applied to complex challenges at the world's top firms and government agencies. Next is Dan Ariely. He is a BEworks co-founder and professor of behavioral economics at the Fuqua School of Business at Duke University. His groundbreaking experimental research and prolific writing have made him one of the most prominent leaders in the field of behavioral economics. Dan is the author of 3 New York Times bestselling books. He has been cited almost 52,000 times and has started several companies in his spare time. Martin Whitaker is the founding CEO of research nonprofit Just Capital. Just Capital is a company dedicated to the mission of transforming the economy into one that serves all stakeholders, which includes workers, communities, customers, shareholders, and the environment. Since 2013, Just Capital has kept track of public expectations of corporate America through large-scale surveys, and they have teamed up with Forbes to publish an influential annual Just 100 company ranking. Martin holds a PhD in environmental science from the University of Edinburgh and has an MBA from the University of London. And last but not least, we are joined by Shai Mindel. He is an aeronautics engineer turned entrepreneur and co-founder and CEO of BEworks, a company dedicated to designing child car seats with an unprecedented level of military-grade safety. He's taken a deeply scientific approach to the development of the world's safest car seat by seeking to drastically improve an everyday product that has largely remained the same for several decades. Shai holds a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautical Engineering and an ME in Systems Engineering, both from Technion, Israel Institute of Technology. And now to provide you with a quick overview of our agenda for today. Kelly and Dan will start. Kelly will start. They'll each provide a short overview of their piece in the Choice Architecture Report, followed by a few questions asked of each other. At 12:30, unfortunately, Dan will be leaving us. But Martin and Shai will be joining us in sharing more about their vision for the future and the ways in which we can aspire for better using behavioral science. Kelly will facilitate a discussion with them both. We hope you enjoy the session we have planned for today. And without further ado, I turn it over to Kelly.
Hi, thanks so much, Warda. And I'm very happy that you guys are all here. It's exciting to have the launch of the Choice Architecture Report. It's incredibly hard for us to stop doing the science and write about it. It's very much a labor of love, though, by our team to share case studies, but also insights about our work, why we're doing our work. So I'd like to let you know just a little bit about what's inside the Choice Architecture Report. So first of all, there's 10 essays. And one of them is by my co-founder, Dan, and he's going to talk with us a little bit more about that today, but it's lessons that we have hopefully taken away from our experience, our collective experience, going through a pandemic together. What have been some of the good things that we might be able to keep in the long term? And so I'm super excited that Dan will be sharing some of those reflections with you in his presentation today. Another essay is by Nina Mizar, our other wonderful co-founder, and she's going to talk about the really difficult topic of how diversity and inclusion need behavioral science. We have learned so much and felt so much through Black Lives Matter in 2020. And there are things that we need to do, work that needs to be continued, and behavioral science can help us continue to build on that path. Our scientific advisor, Dr. Nate Barr, will be talking about the future of humanity. And David Pizarro and Dr. David Thompson have co-authored a piece on the role of experimentation and how critical it is for innovation. This is one of the topics that's key to BEworks. We spend so much time thinking about the philosophy of innovation, what it means, and how one actually drives innovation using the scientific method. But that's only part of the equation. I've spent a lot of time lately thinking about sort of to what end, it's like this idea of driving innovation and using the scientific method to help us uncover customer needs better, understanding how we can apply the whole bias part and the heuristics part, the ecological validity part, all of these incredible insights that we have about human nature, how we can apply those to real world challenges. And of course, this other amazing thing about BE, which is probably why you're here, is the whole idea of the choice architecture, this idea of the nudge that Cass Sunstein and Richard Thaler kind of harnessed for us. It's like, oh, it's one thing to understand the bias, but it's another thing to use that to help drive behavior change. Okay, so those are two of the fundamental components of behavioral science. And the third part is experimentation. It's about bringing a method so we can make sure, just as designers ourselves, that we're not maybe biased in how we understand the problem or the solutions that we're applying. Let's use the scientific method on ourselves as leaders, as innovators. So that's been the story of BEworks for the last 10 years, is really building out that framework for innovation, this how-to. But it's left me wanting. It's left me thinking, really to what end? And frankly, I'm only at the beginning of this journey, and I'm really looking for different sources for answering this question. But it's like, to what end? What is it ultimately that we should be aspiring to? And I love the work that's been done over the last several decades by people driving sustainability agendas in companies, helping us tap into aspects of our business practices that might have been maximizing for shareholders, but at a cost to stakeholders. That sustainability work has definitely been, lighting the way on things that companies shouldn't do. But I'm very interested in understanding the things that we should do. Where ought we go? What dreams ought we hold? And I'm starting to see how behavioral economics can help not only blaze that path of how we do what we do, but to what end. And so I've got this kind of phrase that I've been starting to build out, and that's innovation, with the behavioral insights, with the scientific method, plus purpose, that's tapping into the needs of the broader stakeholder community over a shareholder community, can lead us to aspiration. And I think that we're at a point in history and in the future where we can start to model out what we mean by aspiration, and what are the things where we can come together with collective agreement and collective solutions. So we talk about that, and we fuse that into the essays that drive the choice architecture report. So with that, you'll see not only kind of the sustainability and purpose part elaborated on in the report, but we also talk about behavioral economics and marketing and the 7 Ps. And our roots also are very much in serving the needs of the business community, but we want to help elevate the nature of the work, and how business leaders see the impact that they can have on customers, on employees, and helping leaders drive with aspiration. So with that meant we also had to tackle some very specific challenges that we thought were topical. That's this issue of digital transformation and channel optimization. COVID-19 has forced companies to develop online capabilities that they wouldn't otherwise have had. And so we take a deep dive into that and employee transformation. So last but not least, I have to thank our clients who have let us share some of their case studies. It's fascinating. This work is so innovative and so disruptive. It's hard to kind of take the step and share these insights, but Sidewalk Labs let us put our work, our collaboration together in terms of how they're thinking about and building new cities. BEworks has gone even further. We actually have Shai online today to share his insights with us. We talk about People's Group and the work that they did on developing an empirical understanding of work from home during times of COVID. And we have other case studies in financial services and in the utility sector. So I hope that today's session with my amazing co-presenters is rewarding for you, and I look forward to a better 2021 with all of you. Thank you so much. Well, without further ado, my amazing co-founder and long-term friend, I'm thrilled that you're here.
Lovely to be here with all of you. I am sad already. I need to leave in a short while. I have a discussion in the UK. It's kind of nice to transfer from Canada to UK about whether people are more rational or irrational. And I'll save you the hour of that talk, telling you that it's not really the right question. The right question is not, are we more rational or non-rational? The question is, what can we improve? And what should we assume? And where are the biggest places we could do things better? And from that perspective, you could be 99% of the time rational and 1% of the time irrational, and that could be devastating. And we can all think about examples of the recent past when this is the case. But Kelly, I was listening to your introduction, and kind of it struck me that there may be two important ways that behavioral economics enters the picture and our reflections from COVID. So first of all, when things change, it's always a good time to reflect, but also sometimes we need it. So there's this amazing research that shows that when people shake hands, almost always after that, they take their hand and they bring it to their noses. Now, I was certainly not aware of this before. And once you're aware of this, you start noticing it. It can take a minute to put this, but it's amazing. We don't notice it, but we do it a lot. And the research goes on. It's not just about the fact that we sniff people. Yeah. By the way, it turns out we have a good sense of smell. We just are usually not that close to the object, right? We're far away from the ground, but if we bring things to our nose, and the research went further, and they had these two dolls that were talking very, very quietly. And people had to go and listen to what the doll was saying, and the two dolls, and then the question is, which one do you like better? But when people didn't know in the experiment is that the dolls were putting a little bit of smell out. Doll one was putting smell one, doll two was putting smell two.
Okay.
Which could people detect? Could people know? And the answer is yes. For example, people can detect fear. They took the sweat from people who were parachuting, and people could smell that and didn't like the doll that was oozing fear. And lots of things like that. Now, all of this, you're wondering, why am I on this thing for smell? Zoom doesn't let us smell people. So, when we think about what changes, sometimes we want to maybe think about the little details. So think about the world in which we used to smell people. Now, we used to do all kinds of things. Smell is just one example, but we used to see little wrinkles, and we used to see small smiles, good wrinkles I'm talking about, things like micro movements. We used to have more dynamics in the way we talk. Now, we look at ourselves to a much higher degree. Everybody else is small. What are the differences that this is creating in our ability to trust people, to collaborate, to feel that we know them? It's an amazing thing. And once you think about the little details, and this kind of goes to the little details part. So where can social science, behavioral economics helps? We can look now at the little details, and maybe we had mechanisms that got better over time, how to handle meetings and how to get people to get acquainted into a company, and what procedures to have in a face-to-face meeting. All of those are gone. We need to do something different. What are we missing? And there are simple things that we know we're missing, like we're not there physically, but what are the underlying psychological things that have changed? Like smell, like micro movements, like nodding, like continuing each other's sentences. How are those things affecting us? I think there's a whole range of things at the small scale. And then there are the things at the big scale. So we did a study on about 1,400 companies during the period from March to November. And in these 1,400 companies, we asked people how they feel they're being treated, along many, many dimensions. And we also looked at the returns on the stock return of these companies. Now, from March until November, the American stock market has basically had a very substantial rally. But the question is, which companies did better? What was it for the companies that did better and the companies who did worse? And of course, you don't want to be in the hotel business, but outside of that, what are the things about treating people? And what we found is that some things that have always been important became amplified dramatically. One of them being the feeling that somebody appreciates you. Now, again, think about this. When you're in the office and somebody appreciates you, there's lots of ways to do it. Somebody can tap on your shoulder, they can say thank you. Zoom or whatever technology you use is so much more functional. How often do you say thank you? By the way, it's kind of funny if you notice that at the end, sometimes people clap or they wave. Like, in face-to-face meeting, we don't sit and wave at the end of it, right? But we feel that the end of a meeting is kind of strange. Like, how do we say goodbye? What's the connection at the end? So I think the wave is kind of a part of that. So the companies that had higher level of appreciation had a dramatic increase in returns. If we look at all the things that we think companies should do compared to the things we think they shouldn't do psychologically, the return on the stock was about 3 times as much as the ones who are not doing it. And saying thank you and feeling appreciated was one of them. Another thing that happened, as you might suspect, is that the importance of employee benefit increased dramatically. And I think it's because of the period of uncertainty. So, imagine you work in a company and all of a sudden there are real questions. Some people have been furloughed, some people laid off. There's questions about supply chain. There's question about profitability. People are concerned, and correctly so in most cases. What would ease people? What would ease people's mind? And because if somebody is at work and they focus all the time on, what is happening, that's not a good sign. Now, interestingly, some companies chose to take away retirement benefits. And the logic sounds fine. Retirement benefits are long-term future. Right now, we want to worry about now. Let's not cut salary, cut employee benefits. Let's say we have to cut something. Turns out that's a mistake. Because what you want is you want to give people, it's not, now if people don't have enough money to eat, that's a separate issue. But you want people to have peace of mind. And when you cut long-term benefits, you're cutting this idea that my position in this company is secure. This company is sure about its long-term consequences. All of a sudden, it looks like the boat, something is not happening. So I think that, kind of to summarize, I think this time is there's lots of little things to examine. How we run our meetings. What do we do with bureaucracy? How are people working from home? And then there's lots of big things, strategic things. How do we get people aligned with the mission of the company? When we sit, there's lots of things that we can pass through. What do we do when everybody is dispersed? How do we introduce new people into the company? What do we do? How do we communicate longevity and long-term thinking with benefits, or maybe with other things as well? So all of those things are becoming more and more important. So that's kind of just reflections on your question about what's the role of social science in this role in this new world. And then there's another thing. We all are behaving very differently. When COVID started, I went to the supermarket. It might, I haven't been for many years, but I went to the supermarket and I got things for dinner, including I got eggs, and I was going to make myself an omelette. And I got to my little apartment and I was going to cook an omelette, and I realized I don't have a frying pan. So this was as COVID was starting. I realized, I haven't been to the supermarket for a long time. I didn't have a frying pan. Now I'm really equipped. Right? I'm really good at omelets, by the way. If you want to come at some point for omelets, I got that covered. So we change in lots of things. We change as individuals. We have new routines for better and worse. We have new work habits. We have new obsession with reading the newspaper or listening to the news. Our ways of maintaining some social friendships have changed. All of those have changed. And companies too have changed. People work remotely. Relationship between different groups has changed. Direct reporting has a different flavor. Lots of things have changed. And COVID is with us for a while. If you're worried that you have lots of things to still do during COVID, that you're worried that you're not going to have time, you still have time. But let's say it's October, November, we're kind of towards the end of it. What do we want to keep and what do we want to change? So on an individual level, do we want to eat prepared food all the time, or do we want to cook more? I personally think I want to cook more. I'm not sure that every day, but it will be nice to cook more. Do we want to? What is our preference to being in nature? Again, I personally found that I have a strange desire to be in nature. spend most time around Zoom. And then when I get a chance to have a phone call, I go outside and sit outside a little bit. I didn't do it before. Somehow I have a different craving. Certainly for companies, what is the relationship that we want between people? How hierarchical do we want to be? What do we want to do about working from home versus working from the office? And maybe there are new models. Maybe people can meet at somebody's house for a meeting. Maybe a Zoom is not a good idea, but maybe meeting people who live not too far from each other can meet together or have a walking meeting, or there's other things to reimagine once this paradigm has broken. Now it's a good time to think again. What did we enjoy and what we didn't enjoy, and what we want to change. Now, personally, on the question of working from home versus working from the office, I think we need both. And I'll tell you my sense of it, and we just have initial data, but I'll tell you my sense. It's more sense than data, but hopefully we'll get more data. My sense is that working from home, especially if you don't have kids from at home or if they go to school, can be incredibly efficient. But working from home over Zoom or whatever it is not the right environment for creativity. You know, the things that allow us to finish each other's sentence, to get on the same wavelength, I don't know what they are, but they don't seem to be transferable as well to this technology. Maybe it's the few milliseconds delay. Maybe it's that we don't see the body movement of somebody who's coming to have a discussion with us. It's just, it's not synchrony. It's one person talking, the other person talking, and we can get some of it, but we don't get, I think, the full benefit of creativity in this. So efficiency, stay at home, creativity, come to the office, work together. Now, do we need to come to the office all the time? Of course not. We're not productive. We're not creative all the time. It's just from time to time. Now, I see lots of companies asking the question of, our employees are afraid. They moved out of town. They got comfortable. They switched apartments. They now have an office at home, and they want to not come to the office. What should we do? And I think there are kind of two considerations. One is what's good for the company. And I think for the company, it's good for people to meet from time to time in person. And for the thought experiment, imagine you have a meeting with 10 people, 5 of them are in person, 5 of them are in Zoom. It's obvious to kind of, we don't need to run that experiment. The people around the table will talk with each other, will complete each other's sentence, will get excited. The people on Zoom will have no idea what's going on, right? They will try to follow, but they will not be fully engaged with it because it's a very different model. So for the company's benefit, I think we need to do at least a mix, but sometime in the office we need. But I think it's also true for people. You know, loneliness is terrible. Loneliness is terrible. I'm telling this as somebody who's been alone for a really long time in this COVID period. Loneliness is an awful thing. We are not designed to be lonely. There's these old experiments about young gorillas who were raised with a gorilla mother from metal. Gave them the same food, but it was from metal, and they grew up to be, you know, the version of psychopaths for gorillas. We are designed, we are social animals inherently, and we need people. And yes, people are afraid of other people right now. We're afraid of COVID, we're afraid of changing it, but we need it as well. And if consider the following metaphor. Imagine that you have some terrible pain. You just had some surgery and you have some terrible pain. The thing that your instinct tells you is stay in bed and don't move. The things the doctor tell you is move. It will be painful, but you'll heal much faster. And I think the same thing will happen at the end of COVID. People say, I want to stay home. I don't want to come to the office. But every day people stay at home is like another day in which they don't move. It will just consolidate the fear and the worry and the concern, chip away at their social skill and their overall happiness. We don't see it very quickly. It takes a long time. but on every day it will be worse off. So my suspicion is that what companies need to do is to come up allowing people to work from home fully on average is not going to be good for the company, and it's not going to be good for the individual, and we have to figure out some new mixes. And now I sadly have to run and debate if we are more rational or irrational. Sorry it was so short. Looking forward to next time. Kelly, I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much. And everyone, I look forward to hearing your feedback on Dan's essay. Well, with that, I'm so excited to turn the conversation over to our other amazing collaborators. Welcome, Martin. Welcome, Shai.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Kelly. Great to be here.
Awesome. Martin, I'm always thrilled to talk with you. The work that you've been doing at Just Capital is absolutely extraordinary. I want everyone to aim their browsers over at Just Capital as soon as this session is over. But right now they have a moment to hear from you. You and your team are doing groundbreaking work absolutely on the vanguard of helping companies reach for aspiration. Could you tell us more about Just Capital and I guess what your vision is for this year?
Absolutely. And thanks once again for giving me this chance to be part of this great event. Of course, Dan is one of our board members and has really helped Just Capital on its journey. And it's great to be working in partnership with BE. So Just is a 501c3. We're a nonprofit, and we were formed about 7 years ago. I'm the founding CEO. I've spent my whole career in the investing space, investing both to produce social and environmental outcomes, positive social and environmental outcomes, and also to generate a return. And I don't see those things as being antithetical in any way. Indeed, the opposite, I believe to be true. They're mutually reinforcing. Just's existence is really based on a desire to try and shift how we think about the role of companies in society. We feel as though the market should be rewarding companies for solving major societal challenges, that companies will be better companies if they can serve their stakeholders more effectively. And, you know, over the last few years, certainly over the last several decades, you've seen trust in corporations falling. You've seen skepticism about capitalism itself as an ideology. We've seen things get worse, not better. We were founded by a group of philanthropists who believe that unless we got the private sector doing heavy lifting on solving major societal challenges, government and philanthropy will just be fighting an uphill battle. So Just's role in all of that is to supply the market with information. We believe more and more people want to work for, invest in, support in other ways, companies that are part of the solution, not the problem. Companies that are really trying to get the economy working for all Americans, not just a few. And so that requires a sort of an objective provider of information to the market. And that's what Just Capital is. We are providing sort of a very objective, data-driven analysis of how large publicly traded brands are performing on the public's priorities. And as I said, we're 7 years into that. There's a lot of science and a lot of behavioral economics wrapped up into that, as we've discussed. But essentially, you know, this is all about trying to do business in a new way. And I'll finish just with this point, which is, I think business is ready to do business in a new way. When I talk to CEOs and major investors about their vision for the future, it's really one in which the relationship between large corporations and their stakeholders is much more in sort of fellow service. It's much more in sync. And the belief is that that is the best path to value creation. So the question is how? How do we change? How do we get companies to begin to follow a new North Star, one that really focuses on long-term value creation for their workers, for their customers, for the communities where they operate, for the planet, of course, and yes, in fact, and also for their shareholders. So shifting business behavior is really what Just is about. And, you know, I'm happy to elaborate more on that as the event goes on.
Well, I'm happy for everyone to learn more and want to continue to encourage people to take a look at Just Capital. And I hope that this has been a good introduction for everyone of the important work that the team is doing. It's something that is relevant for all of us. Shai, you are on this vanguard of bringing innovation and science and design together. And I'm thrilled to have you here as a leader in business who understands how to bring those things together in terms of understanding how to surface unmet needs within the consumer space to improve the safety outcomes of babies. I'd love to hear your point of view of how you're bringing science together and hear the story and the vision that's driving BEworks.
So thank you very much, Kelly. Thank you for inviting me for that great panel. So I'm Shai Mindel. I'm the CEO of BEworks, and our goal is to set a new standard in baby and child car seats, actually. And first and foremost, and focused on safety. BEworks was actually born from a sister company that we founded in 2009. That was called Mobius Protection System, and it's manufacturing, designing, energy-absorbing seats for military applications for a completely different environment. And we thought that why not bring that approach and that technology to a completely different industry that actually, in my opinion, lacks innovation in the last 20, 30 years. You look on seats on the last 2 decades and everybody loves to hate them. They're too big, everything is the same styrofoam, same plastic. I hope you can relate. That's what I thought. And our vision was not only to bring the safest seat, which was our first step, but actually to bring a car seat that parents will actually love to use. And that's a completely different approach about what actually drives them, how they use it, because nobody thinks of safety in their everyday life. So after all, a car seat may be a purchase which may be one of the most important purchases that they will make, and most of the time they actually don't like to use them. As we heard, there's a hate relationship with car seats, but they have to actually trying to transform that feeling and the relationship with that product.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to hear more about it. So let me ask you, Martin. Could you talk about the role of science in helping shape Just Capital? What is the relationship between scientific thinking? Because maybe as our audience might have picked up on, both of our guests have a background in scientific thinking. So how does that actually shape and play a role in what you're doing at Just Capital?
Yeah, it's you're right. I have a scientific background. I have a PhD in environmental risk assessment. I've started out in chemistry. So how the heck did I get to be doing this? Well, I'll say this: the need for data analysis, honest inquiry around the role of business in society and the questions around are large corporations, which is our focus, are they really improving the lives, for example, of the lowest paid workers? And there's lots of emotion tied up in that setup. but we want to come at it also from a data standpoint. We want to know, what can companies be doing in order to improve their stakeholder performance, in order to drive outcomes that improve people's lives. I don't know if the folks watching, listening to this, how much they know about the ESG world, but there are billions of dollars now being invested in companies in ESG and sustainability and purpose. And just as when you invest money and you want to know how your investment is doing financially, all of that money is going to want to know at the end of the day, are we making a difference? Are we really addressing climate change? Are we really addressing safety? I'm a father of 4. I've struggled with more car seats than I care to remember. And I want to know, like, is Shai's company really successful at producing outcomes in a quantitative way? And so that's sort of what Just has done. Until you have that data and the underlying information, and you've evaluated some of these core questions honestly, in an intellectually honest way, I mean, you're never really going to drive behavioral change. And I think that's one of the things that's been missing from this whole area of corporate purpose. There is no shortage of very eloquent, inspiring statements and belief systems and values been articulated by companies over the last few years, and certainly over the last 12 months, given everything that's happened. Commitments to racial equity, commitments to our frontline hero workers. Okay, great. Well, what exactly does that mean? How do we measure that? Is it actually producing outcomes that are intended? And if I only have $1, where do I put that down to have the most amount of impact in my company? These are questions that boards, investment committees, CEOs all around the country and probably all around the world are asking themselves right now. So to answer that properly, in order to drive long-term sustainable solutions, you've got to approach it with a scientific mindset. It's not the only thing you have to do, because as we've learned from Dan and working with you, Kelly, the human story, the behavioral economics of how people make the decisions, why people make the decisions they do, with all the faults that are wrapped up in that all comes to bear as well. You need the stories, you need the human contact, but without the data and the analysis, you don't have a hope. And so that's really what Just is trying to do that's different.
That's absolutely fantastic, Martin. And I think that you've surfaced a really interesting issue that our field has been surfacing, which is, on the one hand, behavioral economics is all about those human stories and the human understanding. And people are very drawn to hearing about the stories, the quirks and of the nudges. But underpinning behavioral economics is this behavioral science, and that is this metrics, outcome measures, intended effects. Are we making a difference? Like, that's such an amazing way to just encapsulate simply the science part of all of this, the role of data, the role of experimentation, and actually being able to provide witness and evidence to answer that question.
Can I give you one quick example just to bring this to life?
Please.
Dan Schulman at PayPal felt he did an audit of his frontline of his workforce to find out what was their economic health like, their economic well-being. Once he knew that frontline call center workers were experiencing real financial hardship, he could do something about it. He didn't expect that to be the result. But once he had that information, and the same thing happened with Mark Bertolini, as a former CEO of Aetna, until he knew there were workers experiencing problems, and he had the data to back that up, then they could build a program to address it. That's a perfect example of the research and the data and the analysis. And then, okay, now we've got that, what do we do about it?
Awesome. I think that that's a great opportunity for us to transition to Shai. Yet another one of those rare business leaders who brings a very heavy scientific background in terms of aeronautical engineering as your background, but now you're leading a business that is bringing the feelings and the behavior of the customer as kind of the primary motivator of your business. I'd love to hear how you're bringing that scientific thinking to bear in terms of your product and your vision.
So a scientific approach is actually drives everything we do. Try to measure everything, trying to test it, trying to compare it, try to measure different aspects. And so this is kind of, it was clear that we need to take that approach in the product design and in every aspect of that. But when we're trying to understand the behavior of the customer, and maybe we're actually designing the wrong product. Maybe customers don't think of safety in child seat as the most important aspect. Maybe they want something else. But when you ask parents what they would choose, I'm not familiar with a parent who wouldn't say they have safety in mind. But when we started kind of asking more questions and kind of dive deeper in that, so we understood that they struggled to identify the exact parameters that they kind of drive their decision making. And it kind of led us to understand that they're in an unconscious process that leads their decision making process when purchasing such a product. As safety is not tangible, you can't measure that, you can't touch it. So it was very important for us kind of to understand and rely on scientific process to kind of what is the exact behavioral biases that support customers in the decision making. And this is why we decided to work with a more scientific approach. There is so much you can do with focus group and just kind of hear what people are saying. We want to understand what they actually do.
Yeah, I think, Shai, you bring up a really interesting point. One of the challenges that marketers and business leaders have faced is some of the traditional methods are not necessarily that well executed, or they not necessarily well suited to the say-do gap, as we call it. And I think that that's something that through the project you have been extremely concerned about, because there are so many factors that can go into a decision, but we need to make sure that we're actually addressing the right ones and then helping align the marketing as well as the design of the product itself to be able to help sort that out and help prioritize the right approaches. And so we've used a variety of behavioral science methods to uncover that, address those needs, and to develop strategies that respond to it. I think maybe it's probably important for us to ask you to talk a little bit more about this say-do bias and why it concerns you so much.
It concerns us so much because in the end, we want to bring an amazing product to the market, and we understood. I don't need to go to do a survey in order to understand that the product is, in my opinion, not good enough. Okay, so, and we want to understand what actually drives people in that, what actually makes them choose a certain car seat on top of the other, and if all the investment that we're going to put in a certain aspect, is it actually important to people? For example, one of the, I think an interesting aspect is that we took one of the best designers in the world to design the car seat. He designed the Mini Cooper, he was a designer of Ferrari, and we thought that's going to be a wow factor for all of them, all of the customers. And actually we understood, for example, that design is super important for them, but it's not because they like it to be appealing, for example, but through the survey, we understood that the focus should always be on safety, for example, and the design shouldn't have a great focus on that, only on where it touches safety. So it kind of have to focus all our messaging and our priorities in the product messaging, design, and what to put to emphasize in the product itself.
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely like an incredibly powerful insight. So you've got, Frank Stevenson's considered one of the top designers in the world, not just for his work in the Mini Cooper and the Ferrari, but he's actually just considered one of the very top designers all around. And that's an amazing testimony to the innovation that you guys are bringing in, because you had already talked about the innovation coming from the engineering side, from cutting edge, military applications, and that being fused and synthesized into the baby seat. Now you've got the top designer in the world coming together, but those aren't enough. Those aren't enough. And unless you really figure out how to almost elevate the customer's needs, not just meet them where they're at, but to elevate them, those things might unfortunately miss the mark, and then the product doesn't have the impact in the market that we hope that it will have, and frankly that it deserves and that we need. So I think I've got one last question for both of you. I'd love to know, maybe I'll turn it over to Martin first. What is a piece of advice that you have, and I know we could get many from you, but if you were to give us one piece of advice for business leaders for 2021, what would that piece of advice be?
I think it would be to put humans first. I think 2020 showed us, perhaps reminded us all of the human factor. We have become very good, very efficient at thinking about our economic system, or the way we think about sort of business success, which is obviously our focus. And we sort of forgotten about the human element of business success. And I think there's, COVID, racial equity, the economic implications of COVID, the shutdown and the reopening, of course, we're still living through that, reminded us all in a very personal way, because everybody had their own personal journey of what really mattered and what were our priorities. And so, so I think there's a fundamental shift happening where the human element of how we think about what's important, how we measure that, how we create conditions for humans to thrive, be healthier, provide for themselves, put food on the table for their kids, protect their safety and their loved ones' safety. To be able to do that and to have economic growth and drive towards long-term prosperity, those things don't have to be. It's not a zero-sum game. You don't have to check your values at the door every day when you go to work. I feel like that has been something that has become what was there anyway, becoming more important, and was brutally exposed in 2020. And I don't think there's any going back. I think if it had been a short-term 3-month virus interruption to the way we did business or do business, yeah, that we still have the muscle memory and the neuro plasticity to sort of revert back to our old behavior. But it's been almost a year now. And I think we've experienced some fundamental changes and realized what's possible, that thinking in new ways can be absolutely better. And I don't think we're going back. So that would be my sort of main advice. Think people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Martin. Shai?
I would relate to that and say, think people, think humans, and I would go I'm looking at from the product design aspect, and in the end, we're trying to bring technology for people, for humans, and we try to make a lovable product, for example, and people are irrational, people have biases, and I have to say, it's not a big challenge to kind of implement technology in different products, but it's very difficult, I have to say, to design product for people that they will love, and how to kind of take the benefit of technology for designing a product, lovable products, I would say. Not only safety, I would say it's a very technical aspect, but having emotion in products, I think that's a great challenge.
That's fantastic. Well, I think I think that one of the things that is probably a very important takeaway for us is that COVID-19 as a pandemic has forced this disruption on us and forced us to do things that we never thought we could do. Work from home isn't new. That idea of working from home, we've all dabbled with that, or maybe asked our boss if we could take a day to work on a project or get caught up on things, at home. But we never really addressed something like work from home as a systemic change for business. And yet these changes were sort of forced upon us. It shows us that maybe things are possible. We don't need a pandemic to ask the big questions, to provide us the space to drive the big behavioral changes. We can get there without requiring a pandemic, but it helps us see how deeply ingrained the status quo bias, the default, the way things are just embedded in us, is just so hard to unlock. The pandemic forced us to see that we can, in this case, we must do things differently, but we shouldn't have to rely on a pandemic to help us change our behavior. In some cases, we were reacting, we're trying to fight for survival, but in other ways, we're trying to reach out to do better. And we shouldn't have to wait for a pandemic to see that society can, and in many cases, should change. And so I think that there's at least 3 lessons that I hear from you and from Dan, which is that there's an opportunity for businesses to be dialed into the broader challenges that we face as a society. How can we align our products or our services to the different things that are going on in the world? One of the things, for instance, was there was a campaign several years ago that Heineken did where they brought people together to have conversations. They brought people together who were very, very different in their perspective and their demographic, and it was opportunity to bring people together. I think we need organizations that are willing to put their products and services behind bringing people together, whether it's over a beer or a sandwich. What role can your business play in bringing people together? And your brand follows that. Your brand can enable that, and your reach can empower that. It's also a crucial time to apply the BE lens to understanding people's needs, to help them unlock things like the role that optimism bias might play in inhibiting them from doing the right behaviors in the short term to benefit them in the long term. And I think, Shai, you've talked so much about how to embed the fundamental insights of behavioral economics into the product innovation journey. And then last but definitely not least, Martin, your approach to taking a comprehensive philosophy of going beyond the historically rich data that we had from financial performance and financial ratios, and that led to, what is it? You are what you measure and you get what you measure. Well, now we can apply that to a much broader range of behaviors across a company and let them be rewarded for that, to be recognized for it and to be rewarded by it, by attracting the best talent, by attracting investors that are aligned to that mission, to having the support of the communities that they work and operate in. So with that, I'd like to thank each of our speakers for their time, and I'd like to thank our audience. And Warda, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Just a few quick closing remarks. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you to Kelly, Dan, Martin, and Shai. I'd also like to recognize the work of our team that led the creation of the Choice Architecture Report, our editor-in-large working behind the scenes today, Shannon O'Malley, and our writer, Sophia Delanev, as well as the other contributors on the BEworks team that really helped bring this report to life, and our wonderful clients over the past year that have allowed us to share their voice and their work in this report. I hope you've all been inspired to apply behavioral economics to your challenges or to your personal life. Please look for a copy of the 2021 Choice Architecture Report in your inbox very shortly. I think we have a time to go out at 1 o'clock today, and so that's in the next minute. We're also launching our monthly newsletter, so please stay tuned for more from the BEworks team. And if you'd like to reach out to learn more about how to apply behavioral economics to your company's challenges, or to just learn more and take a course in behavioral economics, we do have the BEworks Academy. Please reach out to info@beworks.com. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.